Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning into another Supatease video. And if you didn't know, your class probably got monster buffs or maybe omega nerfs. And now we've got to update this tier list for PvP to determine which specializations are going to be performing at the top and which ones are going to be performing at the bottom moving forward after these hotfix tuning changes. If you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with everything related to World of Warcraft and entertaining PvP videos, then do make sure to hit the subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So let's get started with the melee DPS. I've got this organized from melee to range to healer, and we'll be organizing them as such. So the first specialization on the chopping block is the Feral Druid. It did receive significant nerfs. Honestly, the main problem for Feral's competitive viability is that assassination rogues are just outshining them in every regard. But do note that there are some nerfs coming forward for assassination rogue. I still feel like Feral Druid is in a solid position, definitely the A tier with regards to solo queue or ranked 3v3. You have a lot of options within the two. I would recommend playing with a hunter and running jungle cleave. We've seen that composition performing still in a very powerful position. It's my expectation that it'll be above average but not god tier in the S category here. For Unholy Death Knight, this is a similar case for Unholy Death Knight. It's my expectation that it's still an A tier specialization, but it's going to be outshined by assassination rogues, even with the nerfs that are coming through for them. It's still going to be above average. I still think it brings a lot of damage in. I think that Unholy's viability will also be more likely because Discipline Priest is becoming way more popular, way more powerful, and I think Unholy Death Knight is a really good class to be taking down that type of healer, assuming that it's going to become more popular. So definitely has a good spot moving forward. Havoc Demon Hunter, this is probably the best of the A tier. It's receiving some nerfs towards its death sweep damage, which is why I'm a little bit hesitant to hold it down from the S tier. I think in solo shuffle it's still an S tier. It's probably pretty contest to be S tier, right? If we're talking about this on like more of a spectrum, it's probably really close to pushing into S tier, but with those nerfs probably into A, it's definitely still going to be above average with a lot of damage, a lot of team utility, every crowd control under the sun, and able to play with pretty much every class in the game. So a really good pick in terms of a class, but I do think Assassination Rogue is probably going to outshine it still. Frost Death Knight, you're getting some damage buffs. I'm not sure if it's enough, honestly, to be able to put it onto A tier or not, just because you are directly competing with your other specialization, Unholy. So while it is getting some damage buffs, it could be in a better spot. It's a wait and see for me. Maybe those damage buffs push it up to an A. I would highly doubt that it gets pushed up into an S tier. It's probably high B, really starting to push into A, though, after this recent round of buffs. Survival Hunter, it was a sleeper spec. It's definitely going to be an A tier specialization after the damage buffs that are coming through for it. Once you've got your 4-piece bonus, this specialization is super sleeper, and it brings one of the best counters to assassination rogues or feral druids through the mending bandage. Definitely a sleeper spec that is worth checking out. Although you are still fragile, this is probably the main reasons why you're probably going to come towards the bottom of the A tier at the moment, is just your own personal durability. Arms Warrior, you are receiving nerfs to your Mortal Strike effect, which is one reason why I'm not going to put it onto S tier. I also think that you're still squishy. So nerfs to your main burst abilities and buffs to other abilities like Slam, which you never really use, might cause it a little bit of problems, but it's still my expectation that it's probably one of the top A specializations moving forward after these hotfixes. Windwalker Monk, again, similar case here. You got really good damage within your cooldowns here. For Windwalker, it's my expectation that's going to be an A tier specialization, probably somewhere towards the middle of the pack here, which is really awesome because if you had every specialization on A tier, one has like one reason it's here, one has one reason it's there, it's got a weakness that can be exploited, which prevents it from being the god tier, is ideally where you'd want almost every specialization to feel. But do note that from left to right is where I'm ranking their power. So Havoc better than Arms, better than Windwalker, better than Feral, better than Unholy, better than Survival. It is in that order, but it's very small in terms of those regards, and there's different reasons why each one will be strong or weak. Outlaw Rogue, honestly, I'm not really seeing a lot of it still. Assassination outshined it really badly. It's got decent damage, decent survivability, but I haven't seen anything about it particularly. There could be something really sleeper on it that pops up moving forward, so keep your eyes on it in terms of having potential. But with what I've seen so far, I would expect Assassination still to be outshiny it. Subtlety Rogue, this might come as a bit of surprise, but I actually think Subtlety Rogue is an A tier specialization. Even in solo shuffle, we're seeing its popularity increasing over time. Its secret technique, the amount of burst damage it has available, its synergy with Survival Hunter in ranked threes is definitely going to enable you with this specialization. Downsides are when teams are really well coordinated defensively, it can feel difficult to be able to close out games, especially with different combinations of specs that are really oriented around defense, which is something that prevents it from being an S tier specialization. But it's one that's just like right underneath assassination, waiting for it to get knocked down a peg to basically just take its spot. But really good specialization. Fury Warrior, honestly, Fury Warrior's main problem is that your mortal wounds effect, when you're playing with another class that has one, it just doesn't start stacking. It's just superseded by their Mortal Strike effect. And because of that, you can't exploit the one thing that is good about it in PvP. So for me, it's probably coming in like really middle of the pack at the moment. Just kind of average. You can make it work if you're really good at it, but I think Arms will still be packing a much bigger punch than Fury. It's a little bit more durable than Arms, which is one thing to take into account if you want like solo PvP experience. But in terms of ranked play, I think that it's going to be a bit more of a struggle still, even despite the damage buffs that it got in a previous patch. Enhancement Shaman, you're getting some healing buffs, which is going to be nice on your healing surge, but damage, I think it's still probably likely to be pretty average. I would say you're maybe the best of the B tier. Pretty close, like maybe another round of tuning for these B tier specializations from jumping up into the A tier category. But I think you'll notice that you'll get outshined. It's hard to synergize with a lot of other classes, especially in solo shuffle. So to be able to climb, you got to be really good. Like there's only a couple of enhancement shamans I've seen being able to climb. And now for Assassination Rogue, it's still probably my expectation that the spec will be at the top. The nerfs coming through to its damage output are pretty minor. One of the big nerfs that's coming through is Mortal Strike wound effects actually not stacking anymore. So things like Siphoned, plus the MS effect, plus the Shiv effect, not stacking together, which may hinder it. But Assassination is doing like the most crazy amount of damage that the minor amount of damage nerf it got on its set bonus, I think, is not likely to completely destroy it. It's still probably going to need another thing in the future, but it's very close to getting pulled down here at this point in time. So just be aware of that. There's a lot of eyes on it too if you're going after the specialization. Ret Paladin, we haven't hit the rework yet for this class, and I do think defensively it's still got a lot of problems, especially when you're not synergizing with wizards. You get wizard lobbies, you're going to have a really big problem. Ret's probably tied somewhere in the middle at the moment for me with Enhance, with similar problems between the two of them. And again, with that rework coming, maybe you jump up to S here for all I know, right? I feel like they're getting pretty close to getting everything in a spot where it feels really amazing, but has some sort of weakness that you got to be aware of and play around, which is ideally where you want the game to be. It's very close, but we'll have to wait until the rework to really find out where it's going to be landing, and that hasn't come in yet. All right, so now we've got the melee DPS. Now we've got the range DPS, Devastation Evoker. Where is it going to be landing? It's getting some self-healing buffs. You're still pretty fragile, still going to be dying to rogues and hunters and this type of deal, and those classes are likely to be really powerful. So do I think it's an A-tier specialization? We see it occasionally in tournaments, but it's not having the most phenomenal performance. You still have the amazing one-shot damage. It's really good in solo shuffle because of that. I honestly want to say it's probably either I think it's a low A. Again, this one is hovering like really between the line. I think after the healing buffs, it's probably like a low A mid kind of pick for range DPS at the moment. Beast Mastery Hunter, I'm really expecting this to be A tier after the damage buffs. It does the most damage ever, really easy to play. It's going to synergize better just because now it does more damage in solo shuffle, but again, fragility, so it's probably coming in towards the bottom of the A tier. Do note that you should only compare the melee to the melee and the range to the range. It's kind of not, it's pointless to compare them, like compare a BM Hunter to a warrior for arms warrior. It's just not possible. Marksmanship Hunter, you're getting some pretty big buffs, honestly, on a lot of your abilities. So I'm really wondering where Marksmanship Hunter is going to end up landing here. You're not completely dead after these changes, after removing double tap, in my imagination. Similar to Devastation, you've got really big powerhouse damage, but you're fragile, can be exploited because of that. So again, like this line is very blurry of trying to decide whether or not you should be going onto the A tier or onto the B tier. So maybe it's safer to put these guys both on B tier. Against solo shuffle, they're going to feel a lot better. Ranked threes, I think, is where you can be more easily exploited when teams can coordinate, stun you, and exploit your fragility. So maybe it's a bit safer to be putting them down here on B. But these guys have potential. These two have real potential. Arcane Mage, definitely still an A tier specialization. It's got solid advantages to it. Massive burst damage, multiple schools of magic, tons of utility and CC to disorient your enemies. Definitely still going to be a top contender moving into the next patch. Fire Mage, probably middle of the pack still, pretty close to punching into A, honestly. Again, maybe just like a patch away from getting up here into the A tier along with Arcane. We're already seeing it poking its head a little bit after the changes that have been coming through for it. So I definitely don't think it's as bad as it has been in the past, and it's hedging really close to a great spot here in terms of overall game balance. Destruction Warlock, it's receiving some nerfs to its Bane of Havoc, but it's also getting significant buffs to its single target spells outside of Bane of Havoc, and especially its Chaos Bolt and its Soulfire. So I really think Destro may be the best range spec come next patch. I don't know if I want to put it on A or S, honestly. It's a really tight race for me for where I want to be putting it. If I put it up here on S, it's like very close to coming down to an A, but I do actually think it's going to be a really popular spec coming in on Tuesday with how much damage it's doing outside of Chaos Bolt and then how much it's going to do now with Chaos Bolt. So really good specialization. Demonology Warlock, definitely an A tier specialization still, even though its damage is on the lower front. Having stuns, having mortal wounds as a caster is really beneficial towards this specialization. Its tyrants are doing a lot of damage at the moment, so it is still my expectation that it's going to be a solid spec overall. Because of that, Frost Mage, this is a hard one, honestly. Frost Mage is a hard one. I want to put it on a high B, low A. It's getting close. Again, it's one of those specs that's like, you know, maybe like one more little thing to it, and it's gonna be competing on the same level. So I feel like it's probably better than Devastation and Marksman defensively, which is why I'm gonna put it on the A. But I don't think it's as good as Arcane overall. Has its little niche situations like cleave damage against double melee, can blast people, absolutely really close. But I think Arcane is just a little bit more annoying to deal because of Kleptomania is the main reason. And spam spell steal is like the main reason that it's held back towards Arcane for me at the moment. But it's definitely like it's getting really close in terms of competitiveness. Unstable Affliction Lock, you're getting some buffs to your UA Dispel, so there's going to be some more punishing opportunities against people who are spam dispelling it, but I think it's still probably going to feel pretty average. Now in Solo Shuffle, when you get a lobby where you can stay alive, you're going to absolutely crush it. You're going to do a ton of damage, a lot of pressure, but in ranked threes, I'm really not noticing it. It's not as prevalent. When I fight against it, it kind of just feels kind of subpar. So for me, it's maybe a couple buffs away, similar to Fire Mage in terms of viability. Defensively, you're stronger than Devastation and Marksmanship for sure. And your damage is higher, but just being able to end a game, like you'll notice that you'll be able to end a game on Marksmanship Hunter and Devastation Evoker, but you're squishy, whereas Affliction feels really tough to close the match, and then you just end up getting blasted before you're able to. Now, if the game does slow down and this MS stacking effects thing has a huge impact, then Affliction might be better. I think again, I think it's really close to getting into A. We're getting really tight here. All the consistent changes are finally, like, you know, they're coming together, they're adding up. Things are getting a lot tighter in terms of the race. For Balance Druid, this is a specialization that I think is probably going to be A tier after the changes moving forward with the nerfs to Assassination, with the nerfs to the MS stacking effects, which directly affects your own personal survivability. And its damage output is really good right now in terms of instant damage on its Star Surge build. A lot of druids are starting to climb more, so it's probably a low A again, pushing B, low A, really close, maybe a couple tuning changes away. Definitely a lot better than it was before. Now, Elemental Shaman, okay, maybe I'm wrong about here about saying Destro is the best caster. I think Ellie Shaman is probably still the best caster. You're just doing the most amount of damage over every other class, and it's very easy to do it. And then Assassination Row getting nerfed, one of your direct counters, is definitely going to be putting you in a much better position, as well as the MS stacking effect. So Elemental Shaman, definitely a really good contender here for this patch. Mistweaver Monk, you're getting a lot of buffs, and again, it just keeps getting pumped with buffs, except they just keep never fixing the fist weaving build where it doesn't heal the targets that are lowest health. It heals a random target, and then you waste all the healing on your fist weaving, which really holds it back. But because it's getting so many buffs, it could have like the most crazy potential ever, that it just like is a god class, but I'm still not sold on it. You're getting instant enveloping mist in the near future as well. Maybe at that point is when it will start jumping up. It's getting there, but again, I think the fist weaving hit would probably be the one that makes it really start to shine in comparison to the other healers. Holy Paladin, expectation is still that it's going to be an A tier healer. Solid damage overall, great utility, just really solid healer at the moment. Discipline Priest, I actually think it's probably going to be S tier. I think that its damage output is now starting to get noticed, and so many people are picking up this spec that even on stream, I've noticed people that never play healer, this is what they're picking up. It's like every stream is a disc priest stream. It's just really fun to do damage and heal at the same time. Multivaried builds here, really good synergy with rogues. So definitely a strong contender. I'm thinking this is probably going to be an S tier healer. Holy Priest, it's probably better than Mistweaver, I think. Pretty close to getting into A tier. But you're falling behind a little bit on mana, a little bit more on throughput, definitely relying on short games, good synergies that we've seen expressed in tournaments with sub rogues and survival hunters. But it seems like Holy Priest is still that spec where only the people who are main Holy Priests are still continuing to play it. And I'll get myself out of the way here so you guys can see the whole tier list. It's getting pretty close overall. Resto Druid, it's getting nerfs, and in 10.0.7, when we go to look at this list again, it's getting even more nerfs. At the moment, I think that it's still going to be an A tier healer, but it has its counters, has its weaknesses, and that's exactly why you're in the A tier. You got really strong strengths, but there is some weakness that can be exploited you need to be aware of, and that's going to be Purge, Kleptomania, Fire Breath Purge, and that type of deal. And it looks like I actually forgot to rank Shadow Priest here. So Shadow Priest, definitely, ooh, do we say it's an S tier healer? I feel like Shadow Priest is probably the best A tier DPS. The best A tier range, pretty close to S, because of its synergies with rogues. But because it's not packing as much damage as it used to, playing with other spellcasters, it's not really an option. Whereas like Destro Ellie are probably going to crush it together, or Ellie with Demo and this type of deal. So its synergy with other range classes, because its damage is lower, is the main reason it's going down into A. But because it can work with Windwalkers and Warriors and Assassination Rogues, I think it'll be really good still. Resto Shaman, getting some casted healing buffs. You're probably still going to end up in the A tier when all this damage is coming down. The MS effects aren't stacking anymore. Surviving these double melee DPS might become a little bit easier for you. Again, you have obvious strengths, obvious weaknesses. Really good balance so far between the healers that are in the A tier. And Preservation Evoker, same type of deal here. The changes made to your class are probably not going to have an overall impact. You're still going to be ending up in the same position as you were. Maybe I would say Preservation is maybe more close to here. In terms of overall healer balance, and especially on ladder, I think Disc is better. Maybe when we get into tournament, Disc doesn't become as strong, but on ladder play, Disc is like becoming the #1 healer. Tank specs, they're all getting buffs, so honestly, it might be something that happens with them, but I'm kind of just putting them down here at the moment. Brewmaster, though, is an A tier. Brewmaster is actually a sleeper spec that's crazy good at the moment, and still probably going to be in. If you've noticed in EU, there's a lot of 3,000 rated Brewmaster monks, so definitely keep your eye on that if you're looking at a tank spec and really wanted to play it. Brewmaster is probably the best bet there if you want to be that guy, you know. And I've been that guy. It might not be a good plan to be that guy, but other than that, this is my estimations here. Looking at the specializations. The active tuning is doing a really good job. Love that we're getting class reworks, and hopefully this active tuning continues to move on to the point where we do like have everything on A tier, and it's like, wow, well, that's good in that situation, but then this one's good in that situation, and there's like clear performances that are amazing about each individual spec to draw from, and you kind of want it, you know, you want to be anything really, and that's the ideal space to be for class balance. But this is my list moving forward, what my expectations are going to be. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below and your experiences so far, and I will catch you in the next video. Thank you for watching.